A lot of talk on immigration because I think what you're seeing is this is an issue that really the federal government has the most power to decide the policy on. And even the federal government, I'm not talking about the legislation or the need for new legislation. Certainly, if you want to spend a lot of new resources, so if we're going to add a lot of major expenditures, you do need those expenditures covered with congressional authorization. Sometimes you can find the money in other places, in discretionary spending that gets put into these large spending bills. But a lot of this is just policy. And the policy emanates from the executive branch. And right now, most of that policy, because there's only a couple of executive branch leaders in position. There's the president, the vice president, and the secretary of state. I'm not sure who else has actually gotten a vote on the floor of the U.S. Senate yet. I'm not sure if anyone else has. So this is emanating mostly from the White House. And what they're doing is they're changing the policy. So they're kind of unleashing ICE to be able to do what they had the capability to do, but they weren't allowed to do under the previous administration, so under the Biden-Harris administration. And you've got actions everywhere from what citizenship, how that will be defined, to actions about what is actually going to happen at the border with troops. New Jersey has already filed against birthright citizenship. We walked through that yesterday as well. Will, we were walking through that with our team. So what does this birthright citizenship executive order do? And I think this one, it might end up in courts. It's interesting because the Constitution just says birthright. And we've allowed a very broad definition of what that means to basically be anybody who has a child here, that child is a U.S. citizen. It doesn't matter how their parents got here, who their parents are, or if their parents were even supposed to be here legally or not. So it starts with the mother. Is the mother here illegally, or is she here temporarily? So not a green card or something on up, like the citizenship. Well, if you combine that with a father who is illegal or also not supposed to be here permanently, which means it doesn't have to be citizenship, but something like a green card, then that person would not get citizenship. But if you start making those combinations where you've got a father who is here, well, then you would. If you have a mother who is here, again, permanently, then you would then benefit from birthright citizenship. So what will the courts do about that? I think that's just going to be interesting to see where they see jurisdiction and how they interpret something that's very broad in the Constitution, and it's been very broadly allowed to be interpreted by the federal government. No one's really ever said, stepped in and said, you know what, is this really what they were talking about? I mean, they really just mean if people violated the law knowingly to have a child here, that those should be citizens, or if people had a vacation here and they went into labor early, that's supposed to become a citizen of the United States, because then we started to have industries built around that. Birthing, industries, tourism, birth tourism. And if you lived in places like Miami or others, you would see this all over the place. Really nice medical birthing centers set up because people would have to come and kind of guess. And so these were wealthier, usually Latin Americans, who could make sure their children would be born as American citizens. And
they would often just return home. I think that's also, this is not talking about people who are coming here, trying to have a baby so they can stay. Not that situation. You're talking about, like Jordan said, sort of wealthy individuals that would come down. A few days later, they're flying home as soon as that child. They're flying home, and then you have dual citizenship for your child. I mean, I understand it in some ways. You have an opportunity to have your kid become an American and be part of the greatest country in the world.
Right.
Makes sense.
Right. I mean, until the laws are changed, and we know that they are changed, I mean, you would understand why people in economic situations that can afford to do that would think about doing that. You can also see why people who are in the worst conditions risk coming over the border because they know that probably 7 out of 10 times they'll be able to get across the border. But now it's Donald Trump's administration.
And they'll get emergency health care. So if there's needed, they'll be able to get probably a better situation in terms of the medical care they're going to get provided than in their own home.
But we've already got New Jersey filing against. They're already saying they're going to file lawsuits against this. So another state. Now we've talked about New York. We talked about California. You think those states would be focusing on themselves right now instead of in some of their major cities, instead of taking on the Trump administration's executive orders. But no, they're taking the people's taxpayer money to file lawsuits on birthright citizenship.
That's right, Jordan. And as we mentioned in the previous segment, 766 arrests, Tom Homan, the border czar, announced have taken place in the first 24 hours of the new Trump administration. 308 of those were for serious criminals, meaning murder, violent crimes, things of that nature. And this 766 number, that's more in the first day than President Trump did in the first week of his first term, which was still a very big focus on illegal immigration in 2017, early 2017. This number in 24 hours is a large number. Also, you know that ICE has probably felt restrained under the Biden administration. So I'm sure the agents at ICE are happy to be getting back to their core mission.
This story's breaking
right now that 1,500 additional troops will be moved to the border by the end of January. That's a report to Fox News from the U.S. officials.
Yeah, and we've got a call on that.
All right, let's go ahead. All right,
line 6. Yeah, Judy is calling from Oregon on line 6. Watching on YouTube, you're on Seculo.
Good morning. Thank you for all the wonderful work you do. Yes, I heard about the troops, but I also heard that people are massing on the border, hundreds and hundreds of people. And they've done this before, and I believe they're going to do this again, try a mass border crossing, putting the women and children in front. What can Trump do to diffuse this? Because it's a lose-lose situation.
Well, I think one is you have a mass amount of force so that people have to rethink, okay, am I going to go through this and then look what's there. Look, this is not a bunch of welcoming asylum officers. This is military and border patrol. These are people that are going to arrest you and they're going to deport you. And they remember how quickly the Trump administration would get those deportations done, so that people weren't being housed in those, the children in cages, all those facilities that we were building. It was horrendous conditions, and the conditions were horrible that people were in. And we don't want that either. So you've got to handle this quickly. And what you've got to do is a show of force so that people stop thinking that it's a good idea to go to that border and illegally cross. I don't think what you're going to be seeing is a bunch of troops put in place who aren't trained for this. So we're not just saying, okay, you know what, there's not enough ICE agents, so we're going to throw random troops down there. We're going to be sending troops and forces down that are going to have training in this. They are going to have knowledge about how to deal with the individuals. And I think the bigger picture, guys, is they don't want people looking over that border and seeing maybe some asylum workers and some tents set up for people and medical testing facilities and places they could stay and food, instead of saying, you know what, this is a country that's serious about their own border security, and because most of the drugs killing Americans and the crime is emanating from the southern border, we're going to put forward a show of force so that people have to rethink that.
And one of the other components of that is it's not just sending troops, but the revival of the Remain in Mexico policy from President
Trump. That's the
Trump.
second part. You've got to work with Mexico. You've got to work with Mexico to prevent these people. And Mexico and their military and their police can make sure that people don't amass like 1,500 at the border, creating a humanitarian crisis on purpose, so that trying to get you to bend to the crisis, or send the resources that those people need to Mexico so that the crisis can be averted, but you're not having to bring them inside the United States. You have to start thinking about it. I know it's tough because it's only been a few days. We have to be creative again. Remember, President Trump was really creative with the border laws, and we had lots of great policies in place.